this video, I'll show you how to do a compound interest calculator using symbols, and as I do, I'll teach you how to use the platform. So to start, after you log in, you'll see your dashboard, which is the screen in which all of your projects will show. So currently I have none, so I'll create a new project using this button here. And all you have to do is choose a name for your project. So I'll say compound interest, and it autofills the key here, the subdomain of your project, and you can also add an icon, which I won't do, but you can when you're doing your project. So I'll click on create project. And once your project has been created, this is the screen you're going to see. So we have this left menu with all of the things that your application is going to have, and this right space, which is the canvas where you'll see everything you're creating. So to start, we'll create a new page for our application, which I'll call main page. And once you do, you see this rectangle in here that represents the page we just created. And if I double click it here in the main menu, I can see this page here. And if I click edit code, I can see the interface for me to put some code in here. And as for the preview of my page, I can see it in different device sizes. So you can change this in this upper corner in here. So to start, I'll add a simple text to my screen. And the way the code works here is that we use DomQL, which is a custom framework built for JavaScript. It has the CSS and the HTML all together in the JavaScript syntax. So how it works is it's basically we're going to build objects in here that represent the elements that we are going to have in our page. So I'll say I have an H1 text. And for this H1, we'll have the text itself, which I'll say hello world. And it shows here on my preview. As I said, I can change the screen size here to see how it works. And I can also add some CSS properties in here, like let's say the color of the text is green. So this is how we can create a page and add a text to it. But I don't want this fixed text in here. What I want is to have a component. So I need to have 3 inputs for the user to be able to say the numbers that we're going to use as the basis for our calculation. So in order to do that, I'll close these windows here and I'll use the symbols component library. So if you click on this little squares button, you'll see that we have a lot of components that are ready for you to use. And the way that you do this is that you choose what you want. So I want this field caption one, and you just drag and drop into your canvas and it'll appear there for you to edit and to do whatever you need in your application. So it showed in here, I can see it, I can zoom, and it showed also here in my components list. So if I double click it, I can see the preview for it and I can also see the code for it. So this is a good way of also seeing how the code works in different components. And I can also change this. So we have this caption, which is the little text above the input. And if I change, for example, the color here to green as well, the text changes for this component. So I can customize it the way I want. I don't want the text to be green, so I'll delete this. But what I want to do actually is to add this component to my page. So I'll close the component and open my page again. And now how do I add it here? So I'll delete this text that we had, and I'll say that this input, I'll call it initial value, because I'll have 3 inputs. One is for the initial value, the interest rate, and the investment time. So let's create those 3 inputs in here. And the way that it'll get the field caption component for all of these 3 components that I have added in here is that I'll extend it to field caption, which is the name of the component that we got from the library. So I'll do this for all 3 of them. Now we have all of the inputs that we need. We can interact with it. And this is basically how our page is looking like now, which is not very good because all of them are squished together. So I want to add like a div to get them all in one place and add a gap to them. So say this container will be called main. It can be any name you want. And I want to add some properties to it so that it has the display flex property from CSS and other things. So in order to do this, I have the props property in here, and then I can add whatever I want. So I'll just put some properties in here. which is display flex, flex direction column. So just like in CSS, align items. And then for the gap of the components, I use a measurement called A. So this is a spacing measurement that we use here in our design system. And the letters represent different sizes. So if you want to know more about it, you can visit our docs in order to know how this works. But basically, each letter represents a size. And you can test with different letters to see how the different sizes work in your application. So what I want to do now is have all of these inputs inside of this main div that I created. So I'll get them from there and put them in here. And now they have a little gap between them. And if I change here to B, you'll see that the gap is now bigger. So this is how you would change the spacing based on the alphabet. So next thing I want to do now is change the text for the caption because each one of my components will have a different caption. So in order to do that, I'll open my field caption component to see the structure of it. And here I can see that inside the component, I have another component called caption. And that inside of this caption component, I have the text, which is actually what I want to change. So I need to replicate the structure as I use the component to be able to change this particular property. So I'll go back to the main page. And inside of each of my field caption components, I'll have the caption and inside of it, the text, just as we saw with the field caption component itself. So here I'll write whatever value I want. So this one will be my initial value. And it already shows up in here. So we can see in the preview that this worked. And so I'll do the same for the other two inputs that we have. So this is how our page looks like now. And we have all of the three components here with custom text to each of them. Now, I used a symbols component that was ready on our components library, but I can also create my own custom component. So let's close this page. And here in my components sidebar, I'll create a custom button. So it creates a new component, which I'll double click. And we can edit the code for it, just as we did with the page. So I'll add some button here. So the tag I want to use is the button tag. And here it creates the basic HTML button, which is quite ugly, as we know. So I'll add some properties here to make it look a little better. So these are basic CSS properties like height and width and border radius, all of that. And I also added this text press me as a default text. And now we have to use our component. So let's close it and open our page. And now just as I did put the inputs in here, I'll put my custom button as well. So we'll add a custom button. And if I do this by using the same name as the component, it already shows up in here. But before with the field caption, what we did was choose a name for it and then extend the component. Both work, but in this case, I was going to have three field captions with the same name. So I had to use a different name for each of them and then extend the field caption. With the button, since I'm only going to have one button, I could do just like this, just call the component by its name. But I could also say some different name like my button, and then it wouldn't show as it is. But if I extend, it'll show the same way. So you can choose once, if you only have one component of that kind in your page, you can choose which syntax you want. But if you have multiple of the same components, it would be best for you to change the name for each of them. And here in my custom button, I'll leave it like this. I need to change its text. So we had the props, and inside the props I had this press me text, which I'll change now to calculate. And it shows here already. So this is how we would use a component that we created ourselves. Another cool thing that we can do is that I've only been using basically black and white colors, but if I go back to my custom button, I can actually use any color I want for it. So here in the color section, we have black and white, and I can add new colors. So I'll pick a color from here, let's say this blue. It suggests a name for your color, which you can edit, but I'll leave it as is. And now I have this blue color called indigo. And now when I put, for example, my background color in here, I have to use this name. And once I do, the button changes to this color. So this is how you would create the colors for your project, and this is how you use it by the name that you created it with. And now let's go back to our main page. And our button is now blue because I changed the main component that it is based off. And now I also want to add a text here at the end of the page to show just the result of our calculations. So I'll just put it here. It's an H2 text that will say that in next months you'll have this amount of money. So it already shows in here. And I could change basically the color as I did. I could also use some custom fonts with it. So if I wanted to, and if I had the file for the font that I want to, I can come here to font and I would upload the file of the font that I have in one of those formats. So WAV, TF, TTF, or OTF. And once I do, I can create a font family using this font that I imported. And when I use the font family property here in the CSS, I would be able to use this imported font. But I'll use just the full one. But if you have a specific font that you want to use, that is also an option. And this is basically the structure of our page. Now we have to make it work. So once I click on the button, that will trigger an event. And I want to do something when that happens. So let's go to our button here. And we are going to add the onClick event, which will execute this function. And this function receives some parameters, which are the event, the element, and the state. And we can do whatever we want inside of this function using these parameters. And you might say, okay, I know what is the event, I know what is the element, but what is the state? So let's talk about state a little. The state is going to be a similar concept to the state in React, for example. It will be a variable that will contain information that will be relevant for the interface. And when I change this value, I want the interface to update as well. So how I will create it? I'll go here in the main page and I'll create a state for this page. It's an object. And inside of it, I can put any variables that I might need to use. In my case, I'll need 4 of them. I'll have the initial value for this input, interest rate, which is the second input, time in months, which is the third, and final amount, which is the value that I'm going to show here on the screen instead of this y here. So we have the state, and the initial value of them is just 0. And so I can come in here and actually console log the state so that you'll see how it works. And where do you see the logs that you put in your application? It's just basically on your browser's console as you normally would. So I'll press F12 and it just opens my regular console in here. And if I calculate, it gives me the initial state value. So my button is capturing the event and I can see the console that I've logged in here. So now let's put an event on our input. So as it changes, it saves the value to the state. So going here to my initial value input, I'll add the onChange event. It will also have the event, the element, and the state as its parameters. And inside of here, what I'll do is just update the state. So S for state, which is what I called it here, dot update. It is an object in here, so we can just update each of its properties. And I'll say that the initial value will now be the event.target.value, which is how you get the value of a HTML input. And also parse it to a float so that we keep it as a number, which will make our calculation easier. And now I'll do the same for all of the other inputs. Okay, so now every time that the input changes its value, I'm saving it on our state. And when I press calculate, it'll console log the current value of the state. So let's see if this is working. And let's say that I have $1,000 interest rate of 5% over a year. And now it shows our numbers in here. So this is how we're going to use the state to save our variables. So now let's show some values in here. So how do I access the state? So there are basically 2 ways of doing it. I could turn this into a function And it would have the same parameters here, except for the event, because this is not an event. I'm just using the element here, so it'll have the element and the state. And here, instead of this X months, I could actually get the state time in months. And in order for this to work, it has to be a template string. And here it is. It shows me the 0 months. And if I change here my initial state to, I don't know, 12, it shows 12 in here. So this is a way of doing it. It works. But also, if I just want to put the state value here inside of this text, what I could do is just use double curly braces and use the name of the state. I don't have to turn it into a function for this to work. I can just access the value here, and it doesn't even have to be a template string. It can just be a regular string. So if I change it here, it still gets my state. If I change the time here to, I don't know, 5, it shows in here. So these are the two ways that you can actually access the state. The function case is broader. You can use it in a function to make a conditional or something. But if you're simply looking to show it in a string or something, you can just use the double curly brackets in here. And also, I actually just want this text to show once I have made the calculation here, once my final amount is different than 0. So let's go back here for the timing months. And I want to make this only show conditionally. So in order to make a component only show based on a condition, I can use the if property here. It will also be a function that will also get the element and the state. It's not an event, so it doesn't get the event one. And I'll basically just say that if my state dot final amount is different than 0, then it should show. But if it's equal to 0, it won't show. So it disappeared from my screen. And if I change here my final amount, I don't know, to 10, then it shows because it isn't 0 anymore. Also, I want to change this YYYY text for my final amount as well. So now if I change my final amount to 100, it isn't 0, so it shows on the screen and it shows the value right here. So this is how we make some conditional rendering. We use this if property and we tell it when to show. And now to finish our application, all we have to do is actually calculate the interest in here. So I got the formula from the internet, and now we're going to use here on the onClick event that is currently only logging the result, or actually the state. I'll just paste my contents in here. And basically, I'm taking the state, and if it has nothing, I'll put a 0 in it. And I'm making the calculation here, and now this here is the result. So I want to set it to the state. So we'll say s.update. The property that we're looking for is final amount. And then I have to close this here. And now that should give us the result that we want. So let's say I have $1,000, 5% interest for a year. And now it says that in the end of the 12 months, I'll have this amount of money. So this is our calculator. And I hope that you get the idea of how Symbols platform works. But if you have any doubts about anything, you can go to your docs. So let's say I have a doubt about components. So I'll click this question mark right here, and it'll take me to the docs for that specific thing. So the components page in this case. And then it'll give you code examples and all of the other related pages that you can visit. It is a really cool documentation that you can see whenever you have any kind of doubt. So you just have to look for these question marks, and they're everywhere basically. So each thing that you want to know about, you just click on the question mark and it'll open the docs right here. And you can also click on this arrow to open it on a separate page. But having it here right beside your code is generally very helpful, because then you can reference as you're writing. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in another one.